To the section in Chapter 5 about reflection. Now, I've already talked a little bit about reflection in the teamwork chapter of this course. I want to dive in greater depth to reflection, presuming that now you are through teamwork and that you are having full-on Harkness discussions, which again in humanities might look like your students sitting in a circle, which outside of humanities might look kind of like teamwork in that they're in groups of 3, 4, or 5. Regardless of what the context of your classroom is in terms of Harkness, I believe very strongly that you should be having your students reflect on the dynamics of the discussion. I think that is one of the things that separates Harkness discussions and teaching in the Harkness method from other modes of verbal collaboration like Socratic seminar or circles. And the idea, the reason I think reflection is so important in a Harkness context is that you are asking the students to be responsible for driving this discussion with their questions and their thoughts. And that means that they need to be engaged with the dynamics. They have to be thoughtful about not only how they're contributing, but how it feels in the discussion. How does it feel for the other people they're collaborating with? And that just means that they're not just focusing inward. They are beginning to work that muscle of empathy, which is hard, which is hard for all humans. I think it's especially hard for teenagers. Developmentally, they are, well, I don't need to talk to you about where teenagers are developmentally. Suffice to say, their body is trying to figure out who they are in space, and that requires a lot of focusing on the self. People who really thrive in the Harkness table are people who make others feel good about collaborating, and that means that they're considering others. And I think that muscle it grows from practice, and it sharpens through reflection. So here are, I think, some of the reflections that are most applicable to our work at CVU. The first one, I already went over this in the teamwork section. It's fast, it's easy, it exists in digital format too. It's very clean, but it has the thing that all reflections, I think, should have. There is some thought about the self, and there is some thought about the group. I love that this one also has space for shout-outs. Moving on to a very different looking reflection. And this one I think dovetails well for those folks who are assessing discussion. Again, there's going to be a whole chapter on assessment, so I'm not going to talk much about that. But this reflection dials down on, I think, the most important soft skills: questions, body language, active listening, tone of voice. I'm not saying that I really use the language in these scales in my own assessments. I do just to some extent. But I think that what these do is they clarify the kind of soft skills or the performance of the soft skills that you're looking for. It asks the kids to think about the degree to which they're using these skills in their own discussion. And then it sort of pulls in some of that, like the individual discussion reflection that I brought up previously here. This is I actually really like this one. This one pulls in a lot of elements that I like. Moving right along, we have a narrative. And the next few are a little bit more narrative-based. So these are ones that you'd want to give at least 10 minutes. Or not at least. I think you want to give 10 minutes to really have kids write a few sentences for each of these. It just takes time. But again, I love that it has shout outs. And I love that this one addresses content. I actually think that this is something I need to do in more of my reflections, is have students weave in content. And I should say that more and more in my own journey, I'll talk about this in the assessment chapter, but I am really going to make an effort more and more to move away from assessing discussion. I'll talk about the why in that chapter. But so then it begs the question, well, then what are you going to assess related to the discussion? I think that the prep sheet and the reflection are going to be what I assess. And I think one great way to assess the reflection is to weave in content. This one sort of mixes in elements of some of the other reflections we just showed. So we have some narrative up here, we have a scale here, and if you are assessing discussion, this is a great place to put that scale. And then this is sort of this evokes that first reflection that I brought up in this video. So we have some content up here. We have a visual of the oval from the tracking section here. We have shout outs, and we have some degree of that individual and group reflection. And then this one is very new. This is one I'm using for an experimental all Harkness class that I'm teaching this year as part of my Roland year. And so this is a reflection, and this is a class, by the way, where in the latter half of the class, several students chose for me not to assess discussion anymore for them. They had already demonstrated that they could participate in discussion at the 4 level and said, you know what, Brad, we promise that we will bring our A game. And so in return, please stop assessing discussion. And so what I did is I assessed their prep sheet for analysis, and I assessed their reflection for relationships and perspectives. So I included here, what are some things that you wish you had been able to bring up but weren't able to in the discussion? I think that's really important, especially to provide an opportunity for the slower processors who might have wanted to say something, but the discussion moved on before they had the opportunity to do so. So working as a team, so thinking about the group, and then thinking about the self. What went well for you, and how did this discussion dance with previous discussions? What trends are you seeing in your own performance? What goals do you have for the next discussion? How specifically would you like to achieve those goals? And then perspectives, thinking about what was said, who said something that pushed your thinking deeper, or that challenged you, or that said something that you disagree with. And I did, for the perspective scale, I do include on their prep sheets a place to note down comments that were said so that they have something to refer to when they fill out this section. That, I think, is crucial. And then for the students who want an assessment for, I'll talk about this in the later chapter and get more in depth about discussion. But these are just some reflections I think are useful. They show a range of different characteristics that, you could take some from one and some from the other and make a reflection that you think works best for your class.